whatever strategy you choose, and again, I don't think there's a guaranteed successful one. You want to be relentless and keep the pressure on once you do decide to start bidding.
For a lot of people who are going to auctions, they're probably thinking with that mentality, if no one bids for it, I can kind of come in after when, it's behind closed doors and get a really good bargain. But it sounds like it's, really just not the case.
People who want to sit back and see the property passed in and then go behind closed doors and negotiate, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. You're there to set up your family for the next 10 or 20 years or buy your next investment, and you should show everybody that you're serious.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Property Nerds. Today we have Paul Hancock. Now he's one of McGrath's leading agents. He's also recently just won Auctioneer of the Year, which is super exciting for him. We'll be jumping into this episode and going into a few things, largely just focusing on auctions, whether you're a vendor, whether you're a buyer. He's got some really interesting stories and tips and tricks. Let's jump into it.
Nerd alert! Property Nerds, the home for data-driven property investors, where we uncover Australia's hot and cold markets, latest headlines and trends.
Welcome to the show, Paul. It's good to have you.
Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that for, everyone watching, they're probably noticing, Arjun looks a little bit different here. So, unfortunately, Arjun and Jack won't be able to, I couldn't make it for this one. So, it'll just be me and you having a good chat.
That's fine. We're 10 seconds in and you're doing a great job.
Thank you so much. Well, look, firstly, I wanted to say congratulations. I know you recently won Auctioneer of the Year.
I did. Thank you very much. Yeah, that was the REI New South Wales Auctioneer of the Year. It's something I've been trying to get my hands on for a little while now.
Yeah,
it's actually decided by an auction competition. So we compete every year. A bunch of auctioneers do an auction competition, and you sort of make a final, and then from that you can kind of go ahead to the Australasian Championships from there as well.
Yeah, wow.
But to win the New South Wales one, something I've been trying to do, and there's plenty of really good auctioneers out there, so it's hard. Everyone's very competent, and it's tough to get your hands on it. So it was nice. It's been, like I say, an itch I've been trying to scratch for a while, so it was nice to finally get across the line after some near misses.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, congratulations. Really well deserved.
Appreciate it.
And I know, all of the people listening in today will have a whole bunch of, really great insights that they can get from you. I'm going to ask you, a whole bunch of questions, I think, from the buying side and the selling side, just because auctions are becoming, a lot more of a thing now.
Yes.
Things are ramping up, markets are heating up, and everyone's starting to move towards auctions, especially in the capitals as well. So, look, first off, I might just ask, when it comes to, an ideal auction campaign, I'm sure there's a lot of things that get involved with the campaign. Usually length is a pretty big thing. People are always thinking about how long should I do it for? Should it be 2 weeks? Should it be 4 weeks? Is there ever really an ideal length?
I think at the moment, I feel like 3 weeks is actually a bit of the sweet spot. I think 4 weeks has sort of been the traditional, sometimes even 5 length for an auction campaign, but it's sort of getting a bit long. And when you're in a market that's got a lot of stock, at the moment, at the time of recording, we're in the middle of spring, and there's a fair bit of stock online, out there for people. There's a lot of options. A buyer seeing a property in week 1 and still being there and interested and ready to bid and compete in week 4, sometimes is a big ask.
Yeah.
So, I've got some agents who run 2-week auction campaigns, or they will run an auction campaign and book it in for, 3 or 4 weeks out and literally run the auction a week or so in. They'll have a few people come through. They'll have people requesting contracts and wanting to bid and make offers, and they'll say, "Let's just run it." A week in. Now that is probably a bit short. I think sort of around that 2 to 3 weeks is the ideal at the moment, anyway.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of a 2 to 3 week period, and then they adjust accordingly if they see things going crazy.
Exactly. Some auctions get pushed back for whatever reason it may be. There might not be traction there. They might need to revise guides. They might have just logistical reasons as to why they need to push it back. Some get brought forward. Because there is significant interest on the property, and agents don't want to sort of risk them getting distracted by other properties or buying something else, so they will bring the auction forward. So that's why I think around that 3-week mark is working pretty well at the moment.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think especially as you mentioned, you've said at this point in time, it's very much, when the markets are running hot.
Exactly. It can change. Exactly. So, but I think 3 weeks is generally pretty good, and agents like that. But yeah, as I said, I spoke to an agent yesterday, and he's doing 2-week campaigns at the moment.
Yeah. Wow.
And if you're struggling, there's always flexibility to push it back and do different things with it.
Yeah. Awesome. If we, I know that there's a lot of different techniques, and usually if, especially for people bidding, they're always trying to think of the ideal technique.
Yes.
How can you, perfect it and always win every single auction? And some people like to go in at the start. They go, hey, if I'm going to make the first bid, I'm going to, I don't know, maybe assert my dominance with everyone.
Yes.
That's the way that they go through it. Whereas I know previously, I mean, I don't know if this is a common term, but when people were really big on auctions on eBay, they would always try to snipe items. Come in at the last minute.
Come in at the last moment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And there was no visibility. There was no systems to stop that as well.
Yes.
It might be a little bit different with real estate auctions, but are you seeing that there's a better technique to sort of run through?
It's a great question. People ask about auction strategy all the time. I don't think there's sort of one hard and fast rule that's going to work, and there's certainly no strategy that's going to win if someone's got $100,000 more to spend than you. It doesn't matter what you do. If someone's just got a bigger budget, there's very little you're going to do to stop them. But I think if you end up with a similar budget with somebody else, that's where strategy can definitely make a big difference. Some people, like you say, like to come in really aggressively. We see people who are experienced, developers, buyers, agents. They don't tend to wait. A lot of the time they come in really quick. They'll make an aggressive first bid, well above the guide, or certainly at the guide, or, they're there to, like you say, show dominance. Some people like to sort of start and get involved and then disappear for a while, and then, have everybody think that they're out and they come back. I had a guy do that on the weekend really well. He looked like he was out and he, bid early. And then at the very last minute, we're on the market. I've said we're selling. I've confirmed that, 3 calls at the last moment, he comes back in, and it almost broke these guys' hearts who, who nearly had it. And I was as shocked as they were, and he ended up buying the property. I think if people are going to bid late, again, there's no strategy that's definitely going to work. It's just going to depend on auction to auction. It depends how many registered bidders you've got. If you've got 2 as opposed to 10, that should probably alter your strategy as well. Most people would tend to wait if there's a lot. If there's only 1 or 2 or 3, well, one's different again. That's a one bidder negotiation. But if there's only 2 or 3 of you, I would be aggressive early on, and I'd just try and have, the highest bid all the time. There's essentially, I had some great advice from an auctioneer, Pete Matthews, who's a really good auctioneer and taught me a lot when I was first starting out. But he said that the one person who's under the most pressure at an auction, and there's a lot of people under pressure at an auction. There's the auctioneer, there's the agents, there's the vendors, and of course the bidders. But the person who's under the most pressure is the underbidder, because they're the ones having to make a decision there and then. They're the ones who are, who are trailing and need to go again if they want to bid. And the best way to not be under pressure is to be the highest bidder. So, in terms of how you play it is up to you. My advice to buyers when I speak to them after an auction, if they've missed out, I'll try and help a family or a couple who have missed out and it's their first or second auction. I'll always tell them, look, when you decide to come in is up to you. If you want to be aggressive from the start, or if you want to wait till it sort of gets closer. And some people wait to hear the words that we're selling or on the market. It's a tricky element that we have to deal with, at most auctions. But whenever you do decide to engage, have your limit, have your budget and stick to it. But bid aggressively. Once you're bidding, just be the highest bidder as much as possible. As soon as someone bids, come back straight away. You got to look like you got the deepest pockets, whether you do or you don't. You want to be coming back as quickly and as often as possible. As I say, within your limit. That is, what sort of deters other people from bidding. They look over, this guy's not going to stop. Every time I bid, he's bidding straight back again, whether it's 10,000 or 5,000 or even 1,000. Every time I bid, he just comes straight back. And that deters people. That slowly starts to weigh on them. So whatever strategy you choose, and again, I don't think there's a guaranteed successful one starting it or finishing it, but you just want to be relentless and keep the pressure on once you do decide to start bidding.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think you mentioned 2 interesting things that at least I've picked up on, and I can't say that I'm very familiar with auctions, but I think the first element is that kind of element of surprise that people come in, like you said, with that story that you recently had. It was, no one really expected them to come in and they jumped in, and then everyone's a bit shocked and probably a bit startled as well. Yeah. And then the second part is, as you've mentioned, the confidence is just making sure that you're always going in really confidently with all of your bids, so that people just think you'll never stop. Right? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, exactly. And you see the experienced bidders, it's in their body language. It's the way they bid. They sort of don't tend to look at their partner or the people that they're with. They're just looking at me and they're bidding again. And that kind of confidence does certainly reverberate throughout the auction and can stop people from, wanting to keep competing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interrupting this episode to give you one quick message. I'm Arjun Paliwal, who is the host here of the Property Nerds podcast, and I've got some very exciting news. My first book, Driving the Data, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. So if you'd like more information on how to get it, click the link in the show notes or the YouTube video if you're watching it and grab a copy now.
When it comes to sort of overbidding or, going for your next bid, I know that there's different amounts that you can use. And I've seen, some people do interesting amounts,
Yes.
maybe on the lower side. Is there sort of a minimum? How does it really work if you constantly are trying to bid, let's say $10,000 and they keep pressing you, or the auctioneer keeps pressing you to do 50,000?
Yeah.
Is there any rules against that?
So the auctioneer technically has the right to refuse any bid that's not in the seller's best interest.
Okay.
That's one of the conditions of auction, which is why an auctioneer can refuse a bid. As auctioneers, we don't love rejecting bids. We want to get everybody competing. We want to give everybody an opportunity to buy the property, but we're also working to a reserve price. And we've got, owner expectations. We've got a guide price, and we're trying to make sure that we sort of get to that place where we can sell the property, the reserve. So, and as you can imagine, every reserve is different. We get really reasonable reserves. Sometimes we get some reserves which are going to be difficult to get to. So the auctioneer, again, depending on how many registered bidders we've got, depending on what our guide price is and what our reserve price is, will stipulate the amounts. And I'm not in the business of trying to push people away and headbutt people on the auction floor and, upset people by saying no all the time. But if we've just started and it's early in the auction and people are trying to give me small amounts, they can probably expect it's not going to get taken. It's not going to get accepted because it's just going to keep the auction going far too long. We've got a busy day, busy schedule. Like we can't spend an hour at an auction. We allocate sort of anywhere between, 15 to sort of 30 minutes for an auction. And if we're too far away, then the auctioneer will sort of be pushing back on those bids. But yeah, look, it happens. And again, there's so many hundreds of scenarios that can play out. I can't go through them all now, but once we're on the market, essentially, once we're selling again, you're going to be less likely to reject an amount. You're going to be wanting to, take anything and everything at that point because we're selling the property. But if we're way away from expectations, and then you're going to control the bidding a little bit more as the auctioneer, and buyers should expect that.
Makes sense. So the auctioneer has to kind of read the room and they make that ultimate judgment call, whether it gets accepted or not.
Yeah, correct. Okay. It depends on, like I say, all those factors, how many bidders, how the market's going, what the expectations are, what has sold around here. If we've got, we're in an area where every house around here is selling for at least 2.5, but we're happy to start the auction at 2.2 or 2.3, just to get it going. And the next bid's $10,000. You're probably not going to take it. You're going to be looking for 50,000 at that point to get some momentum and get to where we need to be. So we're within the realms of reality, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. What's the smallest bid that you've ever taken then?
Well, we're kind of the opinion that $1,000 is generally the smallest. Once you start opening up to anything lower than that, again, from a time perspective, it's not productive, and it's very rare a bid smaller than a couple. Even $1,000, it does buy the property, but generally, $500 is not going to knock somebody out. I say it at my auctions all the time. I understand you want to pay as little as possible. You want to pay the smallest amount more than the underbidder. Yeah, we all have that mentality. I understand it, but it rarely actually wins you the property. It's so rare. You're at $1.356 million, 1,356, and someone goes $500 and someone's going to go, okay, I'm out. That knocked me out. Yeah. So that's why I encourage people to go look at that point. Once it's getting down to those nitty gritty bids, the 1,000s, 2,000s, one big $5,000 bid or $10,000 bid will often buy it. And if you do small bids, you keep them in it. In terms of the lowest I've ever had, I actually remember I had a buyer's agent, kind of give his hand away. It was a property, it was just under $1 million, and we were sort of around the $993,000 mark, 994, and we're creeping up in ones. And I kept urging everybody, just go to $1 million. $1 million is probably going to buy it. Yeah. And he yells out, "Oh, I can't do $1 million because I've done an authority, and the most I can give you is $999,900. And I said, well, can you just do the $1 million? And I made a joke about him chipping in the other 100. He said, no, I can't do it. Yeah. So then the other bidder just goes, I'll go $1 million in that case. So and he bought it for $1 million. That was the final bid. There was only 2 bidders at that point. And so I didn't technically take a $100 bid, but he kind of said that that's what he'll go to. And the other bidder heard it, just went, right, in that case, sure, $1 million. Because he knew it would buy it. So as I say, it wasn't really technically a $100 bid, but he kind of said what he would do, and then this guy just trumped him with a $100 more, and he ended up buying the property for exactly $1 million. So, but
it's interesting. I think in terms of strategy, so I'm definitely not doing that.
Yeah, I know. As I said, I understand the psychology. We all want to pay as little as possible, but I've gone up, $150,000, $200,000 in $1,000 bids.
Wow.
Thousand.
That would have taken ages.
Oh, it took forever. I know. I'm in a suit. It's 40 degrees. I'm out there dying. But yeah, as I say, the small bids aren't generally the best way to buy it. It's so often just one big bid. because the mentality for the other bidder is that they're,
It's only
$1,000.
Yeah.
And then, I'll go $1,000. And suddenly if someone did, a $10,000 or $15,000 bid 100 grand ago, they probably would have bought it.
Yeah.
You end up sort of going up another 100 because of the stubbornness of wanting to just pay as little as possible.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. You do that big push and then people will just psychologically
Yeah.
you think,
it's 10 grand.
that's a lot of money.
Exactly.
Maybe not. $1,000. Yeah, that's all right.
100%.
So Paul, it kind of sounds like there's a lot of different, interesting mistakes that you can make, whether you're a person buying your home or whether, you're even the buyer's agent who can slip up and, give a little bit of information that you're not meaning to.
Yeah.
What are, a lot of common mistakes that you see that lead to people missing out?
I think the biggest thing people do is that they do due diligence, they turn up to the auction, they're ready to buy, and then they sit back. We spoke about strategy earlier about, whether you want to get engaged early on in the auction or later. And again, yeah, that's fine if you want to wait. But I think when buyers turn up and they don't have an idea about pricing, like I think you should turn up to an auction with an idea of what would be a bargain price for this property, what would be great value, what's probably fair and, in line with what's selling, and maybe a little bit more than you would stretch to for this one because you love this one. It's got the pool or it's got the land size, whatever it may be that, you're emotionally connected to. You should probably have those three prices in mind. And at the very least, if the auction's sort of slow to start, no one's bidding, everyone's sort of saying, I'm going to wait and see. Well, then at least throw out that bargain price. At least throw out something that, is you'd be really happy to pay for the property. Because when people come to auction and they don't bid and they wait for other people to bid, it's almost like they require that social proof. And I get that. We all want to see other people bidding to feel better about it. But if you're turning up and only bidding because someone else is bidding, then I don't think you're quite prepared to buy that property. I think you should turn up and have a really good idea and know what would be a steal for this property and at least be willing to start there. Because what happens is if we don't sell the property at auction, on the auction floor, and we pass it in, you end up having a negotiation afterwards. The agents want to get the property sold. The vendor wants a result on auction day. It's still auction conditions for the balance of the day. So it's still probably going to be those same buyers who are at the auction, maybe one or two who couldn't be there or who are waiting to see what happened. And then you end up having kind of an auction after the auction. You're getting an offer and you're shipping it around to everybody and you're saying, oh, okay, now these guys are at this price, and you're wondering, oh, are they really? They didn't bid, wondering if it's there or not. The beauty of auction is that it's transparent. You can see what everyone's willing to do. If you make an offer and you don't buy the property at auction, you'll get the first opportunity generally after auction to buy it and see the reserve price. It's not a legal obligation. It's just something that a courtesy that the agent will generally afford you. So turn up and make a bid, get involved, show the agent, show the vendor that you're serious and you want to buy the property. People who want to sit back and see the property passed in and then go behind closed doors and negotiate, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think you're there to set up your family for the next 10 or 20 years or buy your next investment. And you should show everybody there, both the other buyers and bidders, and of course the agent and vendor, that you're serious.
Yeah. So what you're kind of saying is, if you are in that auction environment and it is something that you're interested in, just go for it. You're not really actually going to get a potentially better result behind closed doors.
100%. Yeah, exactly right. A lot of the time people have been through it 3 times. They've given up their time on their Saturday. They've paid for building and pest inspections and, they've done all that research, and then they turn up and they sort of sit back and then they miss out because they didn't didn't want to do anything. They thought they'd pick it up at a bargain price. Well, the agent knows their pricing, knows their market. They're happy to pass it in and they're happy to just sell it, later that day to somebody else, or, go to the third phase of a sale campaign, which is a private treaty phase, and sell it that way. But I think people who turn up and don't, they're reactive instead of proactive. It's not the right way to bid at auction. You need at some point, I know we all like to keep our cards close to our chest, but at some point you need to, show people that you're there to bid and buy.
I think that's good insight, because I think for a lot of people who are going to auctions, they're probably thinking with that mentality, if no one bids for it, I can kind of come in after when, it's behind closed doors and get a really good bargain. But it sounds like it's really just not the case.
Yes, no, exactly right. And like you say, they turn up and people freak out why no one else is bidding. What do you want to run into somebody and pay $100,000 more for the property than it's worth? This is a great opportunity. If you've done your research and you know the area, you know the market, and no one else is bidding, fantastic. You've got a great opportunity to buy the property there and then. Negotiate. Show your agent that you're serious. Make a bid in and around that guide price that's reasonable. It's not going to offend the vendors and offend the neighbours who are there watching. and they'll come and show you the reserve if you're the only bidder and everybody's playing games, and you can have an opportunity to pay the reserve or something close to it and secure the property. But yeah, sitting back and going, oh, no, pass it in and then we'll, have a negotiation afterwards, I don't think it's the right way. It's not how I'd buy it. I'd be trying to secure it there and then.
Yeah.
But it comes down to being prepared. It comes down to knowing what those, what those three prices, like I mentioned, would be. That really good discount price, what would be an amazing buy, what's probably fair, and what you'd stretch to. If you know those prices, then you should turn up and not have to see other people bidding for that social proof.
Yeah. I think that's a good point that you've raised around the preparation and I guess just the conviction that you have in the property that you're looking to purchase. You can view it of two ways. You can view it in the first way that you've mentioned of a client or a person viewing a property and going, no one's bidding. There must be something wrong with this property.
Exactly.
Whereas the reality of it is if it's a good property, you've done your research, you know your pricing, everything like that, you can see it as a good quality off-market property where there isn't as much competition.
Yeah, 100%. You don't know why no one's there that day. Someone could have, woken up, who was going to be there, they've woken up sick that morning, or they've been distracted by something else and they couldn't get there.
Yeah.
And that presents an opportunity. But yeah, you wouldn't see too many buyers agents turn up and not make a bid or not get engaged because they are researched.
Yeah.
That's their job, and they've turned up and they know what the property is probably roughly worth, and they're happy to negotiate around that. Of course, they're going to try and get it as cheap as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, when buyers turn up and don't do anything and think, oh, that's going to help, well, it won't. Yeah, I'm yet to sell a property to someone who hasn't made a bid.
Not yet. Not yet. Beautiful. Well, look, Paul, thank you so much. It's been really great to have this chat. I think you've provided some great insights for people who are buying, who are selling, and some awesome stories as well alongside that.
No worries at all.
But look, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. To hear more like this and to help us spread the word, don't forget to leave us a rating and follow along for our next episode.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Game over.